Okay, so let's get right into the SSUV rollout. We're going to be covering the buttons at the top row here. If these buttons are too small for you to see or utilize, let me know. I can adjust the UI or add these buttons to another rollout so that you have an easier way of accessing them. We can do that in many different ways for various things. Just let's talk about stuff. Let's see what you'd like to have adjusted. Okay. I'm going to select this object and click to load it into the system. And now I'm going to go with the first button on the top left, and that is the open of the floating UI. And what this is basically SSUV's rollout, but in floating dialogues. Now we're missing the buttons at the top here, these tiny buttons, okay? But I can add those to this rollout or this dialogue here later on. No big deal. For now, what we have is an easy way to control the size of the preview of the UV map here. So I can make it nice and small, okay? And whatever is rendered in this external window is just reused in this preview panel in this rollout section here. So if I actually go to, let's right click and choose 512, render that out, you'll see that it's not clear over here, but that's all right because we have the larger version here to use. It's just that I didn't want to render out both. If you all want to see it rendered, both rendered, that's fine. We can add that in, no problem. Okay, so that's the floating UI. You can right click to change the size. You can set the default size. You can also set the skew. That will handle the rendering of that. The checker map will be distorted in the background based upon how you resize it, but the UV map will render out correctly for whatever you're trying to preview. And we'll go through all this in a moment. The next button at the top left is Open Trim Gym Slim. So I click that and it opens up Trim Gym. We'll cover this in another video. Okay, there is another way to get to Trim Gym here, and that's at the Trim Gym rollout. We can open the slim or open the wide. The wide variant is basically the Trim Gym version from the SSUV wide, which we'll go through in a different video. That contains helper tools for creating trim pieces, like on a calculated measure. There's various ways to create the trim pieces, but you'll see this button here. That's not useful unless you're in SSUV wide. So maybe I'll remove that from this floater. I'm going to stop rambling and continue on. The next button here is to add the color map in composite on this preview section here. So if I select this object and click, okay, it's giving me a checker map background with a preview of the edges here. And we'll just do this with settings real quick. I'm going to turn the alpha down on the settings. We can get a different render here. Okay, get a little bit better of a preview. I'm going to take this Trim Gym image and just place it on this object. It looks terrible. I just want to use an example for something here. Now at this point, I can click. Now there's no preview of the color map unless we turn this on, okay? And this is going to grab the color map / diffuse map, base color map from various renderers. So maybe I'll add another feature so you can specify a map or however you want things to work. For now, this seems to function all right. So you can just drag a texture right onto the shape and then click the preview window with that setting turned on, and there you are. You can see your UV overlay. Okay, so let's turn this alpha back up to 1. I'm going to turn the fill alpha all the way down and render. We can actually open this up to make it easier. Okay, you get a better preview there of what's happening. Okay, we can turn off the edge. We can do all sorts of things, okay? Okay. So let's get back out of this and go to the next. Collapse that down. Next is to show the selected faces in the preview panel here. So I'm going to turn off the color map so we can get a better preview of what's happening, okay? And now I'm going to Go into face mode, and you see we have some faces already selected. So even if we're out of the polygon mode, the face mode, polygon and face, interchangeable words here for that, just in case you're not aware. I'm going to select the render preview, and it's going to still show pink lines and pink facets, pink fill per se. Let me turn that up a little more so you can see it. We'll go to color. There we go. Oops. Click. And you see that there's a pink overlay now. So that's showing us what we have selected. We can go into polygon mode, deselect the faces, and render the preview. The selection is gone. I can Control-8 to select all and click. That will show me all of them. Okay, now here's an interesting thing to know, and this is not what I'm going to call a supported feature at this time. However, it does work. I'm going to show you something special. Well, it's not special, but it's neat. If we see an element that is not spread correctly, so say this internal section maybe has flipped faces. Okay, so we can flip this. And we can see that they're flipped, and it's previewing red because they're overlapping, right? So we can say, okay, well, I don't know what section that is. How do I find out what section that is? Well, you can open up the UV editor and go through all that extra steps there. Or you can middle mouse click as close to the center point as possible. That will select the element for you. Okay? Now, another thing here is if we wanted to move things around, you can select with middle mouse click, then shift and middle mouse click. That will move the element for you directly to that place. It's going to place the center of the object wherever you click. Okay. Now, this selection method is not ideal because you'll see if I'm middle mouse clicking on this element here, it's not selecting that element. Let me clean that up real quick. Let's pack that. Okay. That's because it's selecting the element's center point that is closest to where I'm clicking. So the idea of the selection method is not perfect. It's not going to get the polygon that's on that spot. And the reason behind that is just to make it faster. So if it would be better that it's more full featured and it works in that other way where you can click a polygon and then that element is selected, we can get into that. But at this time, this is how this works. And it's mostly a decent time saver for the most part, sure. And let's continue on. I'm going to deselect and render the preview here by loading the object back into the system. Next, we have UV1. This is a save button that will automatically save your UV information. So let's get into this. I'm just grabbing something to show you real quick. User files, user temp, UV backs, and here we are. And here's an example of some of the backs that I already have, the backup files. I'm going to select this object. I already have it selected. And I'm going to click UV1. Okay. Now the screen flashed. We're dealing with some dialog management. And at this point, we have object 15, map channel 1, and then a timestamp. Okay. So I can take this and select all the faces, ruin that entire UV mapping like that, grab the object, load it into the system to get an unwrap modifier placed on there. I'm going to open the UV back rollout now and then load a UV. At this point, it's going to open up that folder for me. I'm going to select it, and there we are. We're back to where we want to be. Okay. Now, a nice thing about this, and I'll run through this real quick, because here's UV1, and there's UV1 here as well. We also have UV all, which will save all of your UV elements or your map channels, and it will do it in this style. So we'll have the folder with the object name, then a timestamp. Then inside we have the object name, the map channel number, and then a timestamp. And the vertex color data is there too. Well, there was something here I'm trying to remember. So you can reload those in. They don't fully load in together. You have to go one by one. But the backup is there nonetheless. So you can save one UV out or all UVs out, and they're tucked away in a nice user temporary folder that you can access later on. Then you can load a UV, just like you saw me already do. And then we have UV files, which just basically opens up that temporary directory so you can look at what you have in that directory. We also have auto back UV files, right? Now this is going to be interesting because, let me just remove this material from that. If I have an object selected, every time I render a preview here, it's going to automatically create a backup file for that current map channel. So I'm currently on map channel 1. Let's go to map channel 3. We'll just add map channel 3 here. I'm going to select all of the faces, quick box map. And now I'm just going to render the preview, okay? At this point, you can see here we have object 15, map channel 3 with a timestamp, okay? Now, that's nice. It's nice to have because if you're working on something that you don't want to lose information as you progress through it, that's a great feature to have. But you do not want to keep this on all the time because, well, you know, you'll end up writing a lot of files that you don't need. Okay, so let's get out of that. Oh, I left that on, didn't I? There we go. We'll get out of that. And next we have the pop-out SSUV UI rollout. Now this is going to be a little bit different because we already have the first floating of the SSUV UI here. But what I can also do is pop out that rollout, okay? Now why would I want to do that? Well, this is why. If I select Trim Gym, I can load Trim Gym here into it. And I can take SSUV and place that above. I can slide this up. And then I can close these windows out and continue on my way. Creating trim pieces. Once they're created, I can just use Trim Gym. And all of my tools are readily available for me. I can also take this and tuck it over here. And you can do what you like. Let's see, close this out. To restore this to the rollout, primary rollout here, we click the pink button again. That will put us back into the system. We can change position for the rollout again. We'll move it up. I know there's a way I can place it. I just haven't gotten to that yet. Just know that if you do that twice, it will remember it the second time. The position that it was in. Yeah. There's some things that can be polished up, of course, right? So those are the top buttons for SSUV that are primary buttons. These other two are ancillary features. We can turn off the preview button here with green being on and gray being off, and we'll see preview off. However, if I run through a function here, okay, that does not appear, and nothing will appear if I click. Okay. I believe if I'm in Trim Gym, some images will still be rendered. And what this does is it saves a little processing time to make things a little quicker. You can work visually in the viewport that way without having to look here for direct reflection of what that UV data looks like in 2D space. We can turn it back on. I don't know. I added it in. I add a lot of these features for some reason, I guess. Then we have the RC menu system here, which we have File, and we have the savings buttons from the UV back rollout. Then we can also open up directories from working with SSUV in temporary files, such as Trim Gym projects, UVW files, mini batcher stuff. You get the idea. Then we have the dialogues here. Max default dialogues, then some SSUV dialogues. So you can quickly access them without having to select the object, opening the UV editor, finding the tool that you want to use, and continuing on. It's a little more direct that way. Then what we have here is the settings section. Please note that at the top here it says the states may not always be correct. That's because the settings are listed here, they're in the pop-up here, and they're also in the SSUV wide primary toolbar, and I haven't connected all of that together just yet. So Just be aware that if you have a setting that looks like it's on in this section, it might be off. So you might have to select it twice to make it begin working or functioning as you expect. Otherwise, you can skip this settings section entirely and go right down here to the settings rollout where the settings will be correctly displayed. Okay, it's just in the RC menu that the settings are not correctly displayed just yet. Then we have the help section where you can get information about SSUV and different things. Okay. I'll probably update the stuff. Yep, we have to change the site because that's no longer in existence. But you get the idea here. Those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 8 buttons on top of SSUV.